Okay, this is the first video presentation for the criminal and related law courses. I mentioned in the syllabus discussion, and if anyone hasn't watched that video yet, please watch it. It's necessary that you know that information. This is two different classes. We'll be going over this material. One of the classes, the criminal justice class, is going to be a truncated class. We're going to do the material, we're going to go over the material in an 8-week period instead of a 16-week period. And what that means is for those students in that class, you'll have 2 videos instead of just 1 per week. Now, for the other students who are in the paralegal version of this, the ones that are going to have the regular 1 video per week to watch, those students will just receive the first part for this week and the second part for next week, and so on. For those who are taking the truncated course, I mentioned this in the syllabus discussion, and I'll mention it again. It's very important that you keep up with the assignments because we're going to be going so fast. There will be reading assignments going through the book, and there'll also be assignments that I'm going to post on the internet. These videos will vary in length. It just depends how much material we're going to cover, how in-depth the information is, and if I need to go over anything that any of the students ask during the discussion online. Again, this topic, what we're going to talk about this semester, is criminal law, criminal and related law. Just as a brief review of the area that we're talking about, criminal law is juxtaposed to civil law. You have the criminal law side of things and you have the civil law side of things. For those taking my personal injury course, that's going to be focusing on the civil side of things. With criminal law, we're talking about not someone's personal liability against another person, but someone's liability to the people, to the state. I usually work off of PowerPoints. Occasionally I'll post those PowerPoints up to make it easier for you to review the material. I usually, depending on the material, I'll sometimes post it before, sometimes after the video has been posted. It's best to pay attention to these lectures and not to depend on the PowerPoints. These PowerPoints were provided by the book, so they should follow the book, or I should say the skeleton of these PowerPoints are provided by the book. But I've edited some of it, and there will be things that aren't in the PowerPoints that I'm going to talk about, and it's important for you to write that stuff down, whether it be on the PowerPoints or in notes. Okay, so let's start at the very beginning about Chapter 1, what we're going to be talking about. What sort of objectives are we looking at? What are we going to be learning? We're going to look into what kinds of behavior deserve criminal punishment. we're going to look at the difference between general parts of criminal law and specific parts. We're going to look at the main sources of criminal law, the difference between criminal and non-criminal sanctions, and I briefly went over that with just looking at criminal law and civil law, but we're going to focus a little bit more on that. We're also going to look very briefly at importance of presumption of innocence, and burden of proof, and just very briefly we're going to look at some of the case law, how case law comes into play when criminal law is involved. So, as far as behavior, starting with the behavioral part of things, it's important to realize that not all behavior is a criminal wrong. Not all behavior is a criminal wrong. Even things that are wrong, that we would consider wrong. And people define wrong in different ways. If, for instance, someone cuts in front of you in traffic, or slams on their brake just because they're upset at you, or flips you the bird, or any of those things, a large majority of people would probably say those are wrongs. But those wrongs aren't going to rise to the level of criminal wrong or criminal liability. So it's important to understand that criminal wrongs are the specific wrongs that are in some way, shape, or form defined by the state. If people get tired of others flipping them the bird during traffic, write your legislators, and the legislature then passes a law signed by the governor, and suddenly it becomes a criminal wrong to flip the bird. It wasn't before. The behavior you could have called it a wrong before, but it wasn't criminal until that behavior becomes state defined. When we talk about criminal liability, what we're talking about is a wrong that is a crime. A wrong that is a crime. So a wrong that fits under the crime category. It's not just any wrong, it's that specific wrong that is defined as a crime by the state. It's usually behavior that cannot be justified is inexcusable and it generally inflicts or threatens to inflict some sort of harm. And that harm could be toward an individual, it could be toward a group, toward the state. But your basic idea here is that criminal liability is formed out of a state definition. And that state definition generally falls under the heading of something that's an act, a behavior that cannot be justified. The state, the people, consider it inexcusable, and it has some sort of incursion onto someone else through the form of a threat or an actual infliction. And it could be someone's property, but you can sort of see it as individuals have their own bubbles around them that protect their things, that protect who they are, that even protect their family members. When someone else crosses that bubble who isn't justified in doing so, when someone crosses into your bubble and does so in an inexcusable way that will inflict harm on the things in the bubble, then a criminal liability should exist. We will talk a little bit about how in the criminal system there's the criminal liability that exists. There's the actual wrong, and then there's the verdict that's placed upon a person. Just because a person does a criminal wrong doesn't mean they're going to be found guilty through our system of justice. Similarly, you could have someone who didn't actually create or do the wrong get falsely accused and then possibly put in jail for that wrong. Okay. Now, I mentioned to you how criminal law is split up into, that our general law when it comes to bad behavior is split up into crimes and civil action. This is as far as the judicial system is concerned. Laws are passed all the time to try to address certain wrongs that don't arise to the level of judicial conduct or require judicial interference. And that varies depending on what it is. It could be, for instance, a wrong for people to put anything dangerous along the side of a sidewalk. Well, you could go to court if you get hurt by that, or if there's a law that prohibits it. Or, if that's not the case, you could go to the legislature and request that a law be made to prohibit that sort of behavior. The hope being that people would actually follow that prohibition and no court would be necessary. But here we're going to be focusing on the court aspect of things. When it comes to bad behavior, you can have a criminal action if there's a crime involved. The state has defined a crime. Or you could have a civil action. Civil actions, for instance, like torts, are actions against another individual who did you wrong. Personally, who did you wrong. Versus crimes, which is seen more as an individual doing the people wrong in general. That the state passes these laws for the public good, and by, say, committing murder, that you've violated, that you've gone beyond the bounds of your permitted freedom within the state. And the state has the power to punish you. And we'll see some other methods, some other concepts used when we think about